Alright, before we begin the simple turn, I just forgot, every turn, every impulse that a nation plays, even if they are not, don't have any cards, they can still attempt any sieges. Sieges is basically if they have units on an opponent's fortress. The fortress usually will roll either 2 dice or 4 dice, as in the case of Gibraltar here. And the besieging army will roll however many dice that they are allowed to roll. -1 if the port of the fortress is enemy controlled. So for example, if these units in Madrid try to besiege Lisbon because it's... No, that's fine, sorry, bad example. Not sure I have a good example here. But if there weren't any French here, if the British were in the South Atlantic and they wanted to besiege Lisbon, they would get 1 extra die for sieging. They will roll dice, the fortress will roll dice, and when you besiege, you only hit on 6s, where the fortress still does kills on 6s and disrupts on 5s, and you basically try to, you can continue it, it's not only for 2 rounds, you can continue for as many rounds as long as you kept rolling more than what the fortress rolled. And if you ever manage to get as many 6s as the number of the fortress, in this case 2, in Gibraltar 4, then you manage to take the fortress and you can flag it. So it's kind of simple. Let's not dilly-dally around that. So, let us begin the simple turn. France will go first, and let's see what cards we have here. There's a lot of interesting cards. Leader Wounded is a response card. Response cards can be played at any time. Battle cards can only be played during battle. And all other cards are just played as an active nation. I don't really see any particularly interesting things here. Mallet's Conspiracy is stealing card essentially from the French hand, so that's not useful for France. They might try to play Polish Uprising, which is a war card, and essentially, but Prussia is not at war with France, so we don't really need to worry about that either. So I think for now, what they will do is, they will play Mallet's Conspiracy, just for 6 points. So let's discard this. And what they will do for 6 points, they will recruit some units. Oops. No, they will do let's do something different, where they will start moving Napoleon. So Napoleon has 8 command with 8 cannons under him, and he's going to start marching. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now he can choose to continue 5 to Ratisbon, but he prefers not to do, because as you remember, if you move 5 spaces, it's forced march and you will be required to roll attrition, and he does not want to roll 9 dice for attrition. That would be insane. So he keeps himself in Franconia there, and I still got 2 command points left. I think that's what CP means. So for those 2 command points, what will happen is very simple. Lance, who is here, will simply recruit 1 unit for 2 command points, and he'll go under his command. And that was the French impulse. Next goes the British impulse. Again, the French, they've got most cards, so they can preempt, but they're not allowed to, because that would, that would be back-to-back impulses. Britain looks at the cards that it has, and as you can see here, they've got some response cards, they've got some skirmishes for the next battle rounds, Palace Intrigue, not that interesting, and the King's Shilling, not that interesting. That allows them to place another leader, but they don't really need it just yet. I probably should point out that when the game begins, every nation will be allowed to take a mulligan, and that just works like Magic the Gathering. You basically reshuffle the hand that you get, and you draw the same number of cards minus 1, and you can keep mulliganing as much as you want until you run out of cards. For example, in this case, Britain got like some pretty crappy cards because the average is 4. So they might have been better off just mulliganing, but I didn't want to fuss around that, so don't worry about that. So what Britain is going to do, they're going to play the 6, and they're going to discard it, and they're going to do some naval action, so we're going to see how it works. They will, as I said, with naval action is you get 2 maneuvers per point that you spend, per CP that you spend. Unlike regular movement where it's 1 per CP, it's easier to maneuver on the seas. So they're going to grab 2 squadrons here from the Bay of Biscay, and those squadrons always move as fleets, so it is as if they are commanded. So that'll be 1 maneuver to get to the mid-Atlantic, and then it'll be a second maneuver to get into the South Atlantic to start the Battle of Trafalgar. So thus far we have spent 1 CP just for these 2 maneuvers. Now as they enter the South Atlantic, the French and Spanish combined fleet can attempt to intercept them, but they don't really want to do it because they are actually disadvantaged. So they will not do anything. Now, unlike land battles, interception in the sea is in the same zone, and avoid battle is usually also in the same zone. So in this case, they will not intercept. However, the British will try to spend another maneuver to try and find, it's called patrol, to try, and essentially it is an interception, it's an active interception, to try and find the combined fleet. So they will roll some dice for interception. They get a +2 here because they're British. So let's see what they roll. 2d6, that's the first maneuver. 7 + 2, 9, they found the French. Well, the French can now try to avoid battle, and again, they will still stay in the South Atlantic, but they can do an avoid battle here, and they get a +1 because more than 50% of the fleet is French. Remember, it's always about majority of the nationality. So they will roll 2 dice as well. Oops, wrong button. And they succeeded in avoiding. Well, the British are tenacious. They will spend the second maneuver point to try it again. They failed. They really want to get rid of this fleet here. So they currently spent 2 CP. They will now try another maneuver point to do it again. 7 + 2 is 9. They succeeded. The French will try to avoid again. 9 + 1. They succeeded. So that's 2.5 CPs. They will keep trying it. So the British will try it. They succeeded. The French will try it. They succeeded. 3 CPs. So already the British are spending a lot of CPs trying to find the South Atlantic fleet. But I'm not really sure, they don't really want to waste a whole of 6. So they will try one more time. They will go for another maneuver to do another intercept. They succeed. The French will try to avoid. They succeed. The second maneuver, they will try to do it again. Success. The French will try to avoid. Success. Okay, so now they've already spent 4 CPs, and the British player is starting to think that maybe it's not really worthwhile so much. But he will actually leave most of the fleet there to try maybe next turn, but he doesn't want to leave the Bay of Biscay with only 1 fleet there, because then the French who are at port may try to leave the bay and attack him, similarly to what he's trying to do. So he might actually spend another maneuver, another 2 maneuvers, to basically move those back into the Bay of Biscay. And in fact, no, he will probably leave 1 here. So that would be 2 maneuvers because they dropped through the mid-Atlantic, 1 maneuver, 2 maneuvers. So that was his 5th CP. He still got 1 CP left, but he knows there's not much he can do with 1 CP, so he will still try to do something with it. And the only real thing he can do with 1 CP, he can't do anything on the diplomatic track because it's still the first round. But what he might actually try to do, he might actually try to move more into Kent with an army. That's what he will do. Maybe he will be able to do some amphibious invasion later. The British player doesn't know yet. So he was a bit unlucky in not being able to find the combined French and Spanish fleet. Trafalgar did not happen just yet. So now after Britain, France can intercept if they want, but they choose not to do anything yet. So they will play it out. They'll see what happens. Now it's Austria's turn. Austria has some pretty interesting cards, but they're not really that great. Nationalist Uprising can be actually quite useful if they are going to be occupied by France, but they aren't just yet. The cards are not very high value, so they're looking at whether they should just play their reserve card. But the reserve card is a pretty good delaying technique against an aggressive French player, so they'd rather not do it. They're just going to play one of their other cards, perhaps Scarce Forage for 4, and they're going to try to rebuild a little bit. They'll do it under Linz, under Ferdinand. So that was 4 points. They're simply going to build 2 more units. So they're essentially going to remove this cavalry and bring an artillery. And that's what they do. Russia, on the other hand, has some interesting options here. Russia is very far away, so it takes them a very long time to actually get any sorts of formations onto the front. However, they are in pretty good position to start building at the moment, because it is very possible that Napoleon will be too busy with the Austrian, and so they should be able to assist the Austrians if they would require help. So they are going to see what cards they can actually play to help that. But Russia doesn't have a lot of cards. They're not going to play Fouche for the event, because it's a French event. And Double March is very good. It allows them to essentially teleport armies. Overseas Allies allows them to place a marker on a foreign war card, but it's actually quite useful for the Russians because they are usually the ones getting entangled in foreign wars. But at the moment, none of it is really that great, so they're just going to play the 5. And they're going to build up. They'll build up under Bagration or Bagration, not sure how to pronounce it. They'll build up a cavalry for 4 CPs, and then they will move this cavalry from Kiev into Zhytomyr, so he will later be able to be picked up by Bagration. And that's essentially it for the Russian play. Prussia is still neutral, so all they are doing is drawing a card at random. Oops. Just the top card. It's a 4, which means, and it's not in red or in green, which means the AI doesn't play the event and will simply play for 4 points. They build a cavalry in Berlin. They will always build in the capital until they no longer become neutral. Next is Turkey. Turkey is in the same camp, so they will again draw one of the cards, and it's 2, so they will build 1 unit in Constantinople, the capital. Next is Spain. Now the French player actually plays Spain because the French player is in a pact with Spain, or rather Spain is in a pact with the French player. So The Spanish hand is Serbian Revolt, which is something that hampers Turkey, which is not really relevant at the moment, and Fog of War, which basically voids a naval interception. So really, Fog of War is quite useful. For example, if the British actually did succeed in the interception beforehand at the sea, then the Spanish player, who's really the French player, could have played Fog of War to cancel that interception. So we'll keep that in mind, but we will play Serbian Revolt for 4 CPs. And what they are going to try and do is they will try to perhaps take Lisbon, because they'll be taking a victory point from the British. So that was 4 CPs. They will move 1, pick up the unit from here, and then perhaps even Valencia will go 2, 3. That's too many. He cannot command as many. So perhaps the guy from Granada, 2, 3. Oh no, he already commands 4, so it doesn't matter. So 1. I'll raise for 2, 3 something in Madrid. Yep. And then for 4 I will march on to Lisbon, and there will be a battle. However, the British player will obviously try to avoid battle, because there's just too many die rolls here. So he will try to avoid battle. He will roll 2d6, and he will try to avoid to this territory here in Oporto. So he will get a +1 on that roll, because it's a friendly territory. 8 + 1, 9, he succeeded. Now, if, what's his name, Castaños, if Castaños still had some CPs left, he could have chased him, but he's not really interested in that, because he wants to siege Lisbon. Now you can do 1 siege per space during your impulse, as long as you did not battle, and that battle wasn't an overrun. So obviously he did not battle, because that unit ran away. So he will try to siege now. So he's got 1 + 4 is 5. He's not a major nation, so he does not get the +1. So it's really 5. Oops. Versus the fort 2. Now he does not lose a dice for the South Atlantic being controlled, because the South Atlantic is not controlled by anyone at the moment, because there's fleets from both pacts in there, from both sides. So the fort will roll 2 dice. That is 1 hit, a disrupt. Let's put it like this. It doesn't matter. We'll remember it. It's not that many dice. And Castaños will roll 5 dice. Nice. Castaños rolled a 6. So he did 1 damage to the fort, 1 damage remains. Now, because Castaños rolled more casualties than the fort, 6, which is... Actually, he did not. So the casualties for besieging is only 6s, not 5s. So Castaños only rolled a 6, and the fort only rolled a 5, which means that siege had failed. You cannot go for a second round, because he did not roll more casualties than the fort did, and you have to do the 2 casualties that he needs to do to that fort. He has to do them in this impulse. Otherwise, he will have to start again from scratch the next impulse. So alas, Castaños, even though he had a good roll, it was just not enough. Next, so that was for Spain. Then Sweden. Sweden does their regular random draw. The card is Europe exhausted. This has to be played as an event, okay, because it's a red color. So what it says is they have 6 CPs. Modify the piece roll of the turn by adding a number equal to the current turn. So this will add to the piece roll, which is at the end of the turn. If you roll a 6, the game ends. This will add a +1 to that roll. So we put it here on the side as a reminder. But that's it. Now it also gives them 6 CPs. Because it gives them 6 CPs, they're just going to have to build 3 units in Stockholm. Because that's what they do. Now they will keep building units in the capitals until they have someone that can command them, and then they will build the commander. So they build units until they build more units than someone that they can buy can command, and then they will buy that commander, and so on and so forth. So we won't really worry too much about that because it doesn't matter. And now Denmark does the same thing, and they'll too, so they'll build 1 unit in Copenhagen. So the idea of this build-up is always to make them very enticing, to make them your ally, because you essentially get free units when you make yourself an ally with those countries. And also, if you decide to declare war on these countries in order to get their flags, essentially to get their keys, they will have some defensive force against it. That is essentially the idea. And here we are, we finished with Denmark, and it goes back to France. Now, because we've gone through one round of this track, alliances can be made on the diplomatic track. People can now spend points on the diplomatic track. So we'll begin with French. What do the French do? The French will now play this for 6 CPs, and they are going to start the offensive. The offensive is, of course, Napoleon is going to start causing some damage. For one, he goes to Ratisbon. For another one, he goes to Munich. Now he does not want to go from Ratisbon to Prague because it goes through a mountain pass. And if he goes through a mountain pass to enemy territory, then he suffers attrition. So it was 2 to Munich, and then from Munich he will try to go to Linz for 3. As it happens, this is actually going to be quite brutal for Ferdinand. However, Austria might have an ace in its pocket, or up his sleeve. It has mass grenadiers. Select the winning side in any tied bell round. So if they can hold, they can actually be able to do something. So just for the purpose of this, he's gonna hold, and he's not gonna... Now, none of these other units here in Vienna and Prague can intercept into Linz to assist in the battle because they are not led. Only led armies can actually intercept. So Ferdinand is gonna copy it, and we'll see what happens. Napoleon rolls 8 plus 4. He will roll 12 dice, plus 2 for being French. He will roll 14 dice. That is a lot, but he's Napoleon. 14 dice is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 disrupts, and then 1, 2, 3, 3 kills. That is some pretty good result. Ferdinand is screwed. Ferdinand rolls 4 plus 1, 5 plus 1, 6 dice, plus 1 for being Austrian. He rolls 7 dice. Who knows, maybe he will be lucky. He is not. He's got 1 kill, 1 disrupt. one disrupt, one kill. So Ferdinand has to lose 3 units. We'll just get rid of this cavalry, of this cannon, sorry, artillery, and we'll put this one there. Napoleon has to lose 1. Sorry, it's a bit slow, but that's vassal for you. However, now you look at it for the second round. If there was a second round, then obviously Ferdinand, with all these disrupts against his army, would roll a lot less dice. But there is not going to be a second round. The French won this because they've got 7 casualties to 2 casualties that the Austrian had inflicted. Now 7 is 3 greater than 2, which means that all the disrupts on Ferdinand's army become kills. How many disrupts were on his armies? 1, 2, 3. So 3 of his units were disrupted. The rest of the disrupts don't really matter because he doesn't have any more units. So all of his units are killed. That was brutal. Now, this was an overrun because all of the units got killed, which means Napoleon can continue marching if he wants. If Napoleon actually got 6s more than the opponent's army, more than Ferdinand's army, so if all those 5s were 6s to begin with, not because of the rout, then that would be an overkill, and when you get an overkill, you get a flag overrun. He would have been able to put a flag for free without spending a CP. As it were, that didn't matter, but Napoleon still wants to place a CP, so I think Napoleon spent 1, 2, 3. So he's going to spend the 4th CP to flag Linz, and then he's going to spend the 5th CP to put a flag on Salzburg. Because he can do it, because Salzburg is non-interceptable. It's non-interceptable because the unit here in Tyrol, oh no, it's an army, he can't do it. He cannot do it. So instead of doing that, for 1 CP, he's going to bring Lannes' army, he's going to bring Lorraine Devout's army to Lannes. Now, this is something interesting that I can show you here. Now we have 2 armies in the same place. Now, you can leave them in the same place like that, but that's not very advisable. Instead, Lannes can command 6, Devout can command 6, but he can form an army group. So Devout can command 6, out of which 2 will be cavalry and 1 will be Lannes, which then commands his own 6. So what we do is we put them on top like that, and you can see Devout commands this and that, which together is 3, because you count 2 units here and 1 leader is 3. So Devout commands 3, and then Lannes itself commands 6. So you can build some pretty large armies. The only problem in doing that is that this kind of army, which is called an army group, will move slower. Each space now will cost 2 CPs rather than 1 CP. But that's okay, it's a pretty formidable army. So we'll keep it as that. And that's the French player's turn. Now the French, now the British, it's the British turn. The British see that it becomes quite detrimental. The Austrians are in big yogurt. So what the British player is going to do, he's going to play the Parliament card. Britain may give this card to a coalition nation to use this turn as 5 CPs. So this actually changed in the 2nd edition, but the Parliament cards in the 2nd edition essentially give cards to the other players. So he decides to use that, which means that Austria will draw a card. And that's essentially how the game goes, and it goes on and on until people ran out of cards, and that'll be the end of the turn, and there will be a peace roll. Hope you enjoyed it.